Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso, and we just wrapped up our interview with the esteemed author Barry James Dyke, and just a ton of information. Anthony, what are some of your takeaways?
I'm so flattered that he took the time to be on our podcast. You know, we've been following him and reading his book since we got into the business, and the ability to do a little Q&A with him was great. And man, there were so many things I picked up from here. He had some great one-liners. Like he talked about when these major companies are doing their compensation packages. You know, what he said is that there's no cop on the beat. I mean, there's no real watchdog in there. He also talked about having fiscal fitness, which I thought was a pretty cool analogy. We're all working on physical fitness, but the fiscal, meaning money, is a great thing as well. And he also said he never met somebody who made $1 million off of mutual funds, which I thought, I concur. I've yet to meet anybody who's made $1 million. And the old saying is, you know, in order to have $1 million in Wall Street, you need to put in 2 million. But but the underlying theme of what I got from his books and from his interview is that consistently, Wall Street and politicians and these business leaders are telling us one thing, but they're doing something totally different, which is really good to hear his perspective on that. What were some of your takeaways, Cam?
Yeah, to jump off of your kind of last point there was, man, there's been this systematic transfer of wealth that has taken place and continues to take place. And his 3 books highlight it. And in our conversation, what he highlights is the fact that, man, once pensions kind of went by the wayside in the 70s, is that risk that was assumed on the investment side and getting those returns to provide for those pensions for those employees was transferred. And it wasn't transferred to Wall Street. It was actually transferred over to the employees. And so now it sits squarely on the shoulders of individuals. And you see it in these products such as 401ks and IRAs and these new target date mutual funds. And he does a great job of highlighting some of the pitfalls of these investments, and not only highlighting the pitfalls, but he also provides some solutions. And he had one other term in there that I love that I really don't think I've ever heard before. I wrote it down. It was called disintermediation, which was the desperation for higher yields, and which forces individuals into higher speculative investments or products. And man, I enjoyed that piece there. And the last takeaway that I had was that he gave you a whole lot of credit during this conversation. He must have said, Anthony, you know this probably 4 or 5 times. And so maybe the lack of credit that I got from Barry James Dyke was a little humbling, to say the least. But I still hold him in very high regard.
When you had started your last point is, I really haven't heard this before. I thought you were going to say, well, I thought your answer was going to be, well, Anthony, you know this, right? But the funny thing is that, not funny, half the time he said, Anthony, you know this, I'm shaking my head, but inside I'm like, uh-oh, I hope he doesn't ask me about it, because I'm not sure if I fully know it. But it was a very fun interview. It was good. I enjoyed it.
The interview is just like his books, a ton of information packed inside of here. And his books are a great read. The only thing I would say is that we've also got our ebook out there that is Why Financial Planning Has Failed. And you can find that at www.infinitewealthconsultants.com/ebook with no hyphen. And that's a great quick read as to some of the information that we've put together as to the reasons why financial planning has failed. And so read that book. You'll got it. We'll add the links in there to his website and to his books as well. So enjoy
the episode.
Take care. Barry, thanks for joining us. If you could give us a little bit of background about how you got started in this industry, and also maybe a little bit of background about the lead up to your first book here, which was The Pirates of Manhattan, systematically plundering the American consumer and how to protect against it?
Well, I got to college and I had spent a lot of time in radio. Believe it or not, I get into high tech, and I actually used to sell parts to the aerospace industry. I used to travel around the country, and then I get involved in a layoff around 81, 82, whatever. And this is a really bad economic time, kind of like now. So I got into the insurance business just because I really wanted to work for myself. But in any event, that's how it all started. And then I got in the business. I was Rookie of the Year for Prudential in 82, 83. And then I left New England Life. I got into the pension business. I had my own pension firm. I sold it in New England Life in 89. In 1990, I set up a third-party administration firm that did benefits for corporations, publicly traded companies, venture capital companies. And then in 96, I sold that to my partner at the time. And then in 2001, I set up an RIA. And in between that time, went through a horrific divorce. And I was pretty successful at doing what I was doing, but I lost everything. And, found Jesus in the whole thing about this. But I realized a lot of the financial products which were sold by Wall Street don't work, and they never can work. And luckily, I was introduced to the LEAP process, which was started by a guy named Bob Castellone, one of my mentors. And then he showed me from a mathematical point of view that most financial products sold to the American public cannot work, never will work. And then I was also, because I started doing the research, and then I was introduced to my friend and mentor, R. Nelson Nash, and which I assume you guys kind of get the name Infinite Wealth from Infinite Banking. And he was a tremendous blessing in my life, a tremendous Christian, a real mentor, and he knew what I essentially had lost. My life was like a book of Job. But in any event, so I wrote the first book, The Pirates of Manhattan, which essentially exposed why banks are unstable and why mutual funds don't work, and why life insurance and annuity products are very stable. And then I wrote that, and I published it. Well, actually, the first talk I gave in the book was in May 2007 in Birmingham, Alabama, at Nelson's think tank. And then the financial crisis kind of exploded. So I looked like Notre Dame. And I wasn't Notre Dame. I was just a good researcher. So I'm not a great salesperson, but I'd like to figure out how things work. And so as then when I really get involved with the Austrian economics and how leveraged banks are, and how the media is in bed with the banks, but it hasn't been easy, guys, because if you talk about this stuff, this is not what the public wants to hear. So so it's been quite the ride. I've been very blessed. I've worked really hard on it. So I wrote the first book, and that's sold in 23 countries now. I've sold it. And then I wrote The Pirates of Manhattan 2. I don't know if you guys written that. The Highway to Serfdom, which is about target date funds, which is essentially the default investment for 401ks, which is criminal, I believe. And then the last book I wrote in 2015, Guaranteed Income. Dave Walker was the former head of the GAO. Did the forward to that. He was, Dave Walker. He was on 60 Minutes about the debt problem, and just a wonderful guy. Trustee of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation and Social Security, and now he teaches economics at the U.S. Naval Academy. He's a good friend. So a lot of good people have been, through writing the books, have believed in me, but it hasn't been easy. So that's kind of a nickel tour, and I live in New England. I do work all around the country now, and it's been a blessing.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, let's just get this out. The good elephant in the room. You're a big fan of New England. Does that mean Patriots, or do you not like cheaters?
I love my Patriots, okay, but now but it's been a dynasty, and that's another thing with Robert Kraft. We get another story, guys, to talk about that. But I love New England because it's you get the seasons. I live in a beautiful place, and it's expensive, but I love it. And the New England Patriots. Hey, Brady and Gronkowski are ending up in Tampa now. So So maybe my accountant's down that area, so maybe I'll see him down there.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
And to get it back to the book, for anybody that's read these books, these are just packed full of information. Where does that come from? Is that just a personality trait of yours? Or, it's almost like you're an investigative journalist.
Well, like
it's
a
just
CPA or something.
Yes. Well, yeah. I just don't like bullies. I just don't, and I think really what I've discovered with all this stuff is all these banks, these asset managers, they're economic bullies, and it's kind of like control of central planning is what the Austrian School of Economics is warned about, and so I like things that work. And as I say, I told you guys, I just bought myself a nice new 911 used Porsche, but it's a beautiful car. It looks new, but I like things that work really well, which are highly engineered. And I realize there's no engineering, or there's no really it's all this gambling, speculation with other people's money, and there's no accountability. And so I just started doing this, and one of the things which I did. I was going through a tough time. I went through a tough divorce and stuff like that. That's another story, but it's in the book, as you know. It discloses it all. But at the time, I really had to. I had to start reading, and so I read everything I could get my hands on. And then, because I started reading The Creature from Jekyll Island, and I started reading Secrets of the Temple by William Greider, and and all these other books, and started really understanding it. And then I said, "Oh my God, this is much bigger than me." So when I realized on how unstable banks were, I said, "Where should people put their money?" And I had been in the business long enough where I realized a lot of the financial products which I had sold, they were complicated, they fell apart, but like the life insurance stuff actually worked. And so I'm a capitalist. I do own a registered investment advisory firm. Full disclosure, we do manage equities for people, but I realize a lot of this stuff just doesn't work. It can't work, and it's sad because we're in a retirement crisis, and a balance sheet crisis. And I think with God bless Nelson Nash and guys like Bob Castellone and Don Blanton, who founded Circle of Wealth, really have given people an honest alternative to the Wall Street casino.
Now, Barry, you mentioned a couple times that these financial products don't work. Would you mind expanding on that?
Well, the whole thing is that, and I learned this from Bob Castellone, no one knows what the future will bring. We don't know what interest rates are going to be. We don't know what tax rates are going to be. We don't know whether we die or become disabled. We just don't know. No one knows the future. Now, we can make a guess, or a good guess, and Anthony, you're a recovering accountant, if you will, but the whole thing's, so we can't predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
So what we see today is these financial institutions becoming God. They're saying, "Oh, put your money into a target date fund, and you'll get this stuff." Well, it's just a total illusion. And what you find out with a lot of banking and stuff like that, they're not basing this stuff on facts, because facts are our friends. They're basing it on illusion, or what's good for Wall Street. So the whole thing is, there's so many disasters lately. And there's a whole venture, Silicon Valley. I'm all for capitalism, all for Google and all this stuff. Believe me, don't get me wrong. But so much of it is quite frankly, BS. 90% of capital, venture capital deals fail. And I'll testify in court on this stuff. And so what you see is, but who makes the fees and all this? The venture capitalists make it. The private equity firms make it. And we can talk about Caesars Casino state, and if you'd like to later on. So the people, they're always making fees or rents. So, but they're not protecting people's principal. Whereas a life insurance company is legally obligated to do so under the rule of law.
When I read your first book, the first Pirates of Manhattan, is one of the things that jumped out to me was kind of the hypocrisy that you highlight is from these big financial institutions and banks that literally go out there and tell you one thing, and then with their own personal stash, they go and do another. And in your book, you go through the messages that they put out there and just tell people either in publications or advertisements. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, the big money center banks, and again, anyone goes to my website barryjamesdyke.com, they can get the books, everything, all the information up there. I got this through information from the SEC, the FDIC, and everything. So the banking regulators. So none of this is hooey. This is all fact. But the major banks, J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, or Wells Fargo, Wells Fraud, as I call it, or Citigroup, or all these banks, U.S. banks. I don't know who the bigger banks are, but all these banks. What I discovered, and I think really God was working in my life, is I discovered that actually the banks were the biggest purchasers of life insurance for their own account. So they love to do wealth. Matter of fact, since the last financial crisis, wealth management has become a huge portion of Wells Fargo, Citigroup, Bank of America, or Merrill Lynch. I think it's roughly between 20 and 30% of net revenue right now. And but for their own account, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, U.S. Bank, Wells Fraud, all these banks buy huge amounts of bank-owned life insurance, and actually still increasing. So what I discovered too after the financial crisis is one of the only places the bank did not lose money in 2007, 2008 was in their life insurance account. So I said, hey, if I tell the people the truth, this will get out there. Well, it's not that easy. The only way you can get it out is through guys like you, because I've been interviewed by Bloomberg at length and various other entities, okay, and they won't really publish it or really reveal it because their biggest advertisers are, number one are the car companies, number two are the mobile phone, cell phone companies, number three the banks and the asset managers. So if I'm running a newspaper and I want to stay in business, I need my advertising, or I'm CNBC or Bloomberg or whatever. Am I going to piss off my advertisers? I wouldn't if I was running these entities. So why would my research is about as welcome as a skunk at a summer picnic, So anyways, but this is the truth.
Or it's about as welcome as a CPA at a networking event. When I again is Pirates of Manhattan, the first book, man, I love that book, and in preparation for this conversation, as I started going back through some of these books, and man, I still remember on page 151 in your book is when you go through and you talk about BOLI, bank-owned life insurance, and Tier 1 capital. And that was the first time I was introduced to it, and how much life insurance these banking institutions are purchasing every single year. And like you said, it just continues to increase.
Yeah, matter of fact, I have some. I told you guys I'm doing maybe I can find it, but I'm really. By the way, also people can visit my YouTube channel. YouTube, the Economic Warrior, Barry James Dyke. It's a work in progress, but I'll be releasing a video on it pretty soon.
Perfect.
Banks, roughly 80% of the major banks in the United States, and I'm saying those with assets of 10 billion or more, own bank-owned life insurance for their own account. And this is as of December 31st of 2019. So the truth is, so I think it's like in the aggregate, banks own something like 172 billion in cash surrender value. So they have own so much life insurance on their balance sheets that they can be life insurance companies unto themselves. But again, are you going to hear this in CNBC or Bloomberg or
from them, right? They're certainly not going to say that.
So this is the whole thing. So and the reason why I use it, is it's a very stable asset. And as you guys know, you read my books, that it resides in Tier 1 capital, which is the most important asset in any of the banks. The Tier 1, as you know, the higher the tier 1, the more they can lend out to the public. So if a bank, let's say, is like a bank like J.P. Morgan has 11 billion in cash surrender value on their Tier 1 capital, then they can lend. Now the irony of the whole thing is that they're getting not only the death benefit and the guaranteed increase and all that stuff, but they can also lend against that cash value.
It's crazy.
So, but this is all the truth, but you just don't see it too much out there.
But then you go talk to a Chase advisor. I mean, They're not selling or recommending whole life.
No, they want to sell you mutual funds.
Yeah.
They want to sell you actively managed mutual funds. And that's what they do. And so this is it's all, and they want to essentially shift all the economic risk onto the consumer. And this is one of the great things which I really, when I first started in this business, hate to say it, over 35 years ago, the most important things were really to protect people from perils and risks. The homeowners insurance, they made sure they had the proper home insurance and auto insurance and liability and disability and major medical and all that stuff. And that's what was the core, which I was taught in. Now it's like, the only way to make money is to throw it into the casino.
Yeah.
And so it's been a major shift. And the thing, even I have kids, I love my kids, but it's even been because even with everything they've heard, it's like the only way to save is to throw it into Vanguard or throw it into the casino and the whole thing. And there is no safety in any of this stuff. Okay, and if you look at the collapses of all these companies, who's holding the bag is the retail investor through their mutual funds.
One of the things we talk about all the time, and one of our hopes for our podcast, is simply to educate people. And so that's one of the reasons that I have always recommended your series of books, is the education that you can find in there. And one of the things that I found is mutual funds is people throw money into those things and they don't have a good understanding of how they work and the risks that come along with those. And I think it's chapter 2 of the Pirates of Manhattan 2, and where you actually outline maybe 10 or 11 some of the problems associated with mutual funds. And so if anybody's listening and has questions or doesn't understand what kind of pitfalls are associated with those, man, dive into that book, read that chapter. There's a lot of really good information there.
Yeah. So there's a lot. And so this is the whole thing, the gambling with other people's money. And this is, so the whole thing is, and my point is, guys, the gambling with other people's money. Okay, but for their own self, but with JP Morgan puts their money and they fund their executive pensions with life insurance. So it's do as I say, not as I do.
So, you mentioned gambling with other people's money. That sounds like a good segue. You've been teasing us a little bit with some story with Caesars Entertainment.
Okay, because you guys are in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I like Vegas, by the way.
So do we.
But and the funny thing is, for years, Wall Street wouldn't even fund Vegas, believe it or not, because they thought it was immoral to bank to fund casinos. But in any event, that's all changed. So the greatest example of this gambling out of control was the collapse of Caesars Entertainment. Went to bankruptcy in 2015. Well, that was a leveraged buyout done by two of Wall Street's premier private equity firms, Apollo Global Management out of New York, and Texas Pacific Group out of Texas and California. And that was a leveraged buyout. And Anthony, you know how leveraged buyouts work. This is take a teeny little bit of their own money, and they get a good chunk of other people's money, which is generally the state pension funds from California or Nevada, whatever the case may be. And then they finance the rest of this bloody monster with debt. Now, we all know from personal experience that if you put too much debt on an individual or a family or a business, generally you go bankrupt or you go into default. Would you agree, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But this is the new model of Wall Street. Lots and lots of debt. Okay, so they did a monster leverage buyout of Caesars Casino in 2008 for close to $30 billion. Okay, Apollo Global and Texas Pacific Group put very little money down of their own money, and because they supposedly put all this debt, you're going to make the companies more efficient and the whole thing like that. Well, that's BS. So what happened? It's a very long story, but in around 2013, 2014, because Caesars Entertainment had $25 billion in debt on their balance sheet, their interest costs alone were $2.1 billion per year.
Full.
This is in your own backyard, okay?
Yikes.
How many people in Vegas know this?
I was unaware.
Oh yeah. So it's interest costs. Now the reason why they use all this debt, Anthony, as you know, because when we use debt for business for businesses, as you know, it's all deductible.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are driving an 18-wheeler through to the tax code, and so essentially the taxpayer is subsidizing this whole malfeasance.
Interesting point.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And you get these billionaires like Leon Black orchestrating this thing is worth 5, 6, 7 billion, whatever. And they're saying what a great deal this is. So the thing is they're strangling with the debt, you know, after the and they did this after the financial crisis, 2008.
Yeah.
So what happens is that eventually, this is why I get to finish this book eventually, is so the debt. So they start selling off all these casino companies to pay down the debt. Well, even so what? So with the 2.1 billion a year just in interest payments, they end up going bankrupt, BK, in 2015. Now, this has just been a. But you know who made money on this whole deal?
Probably
private equity firms Josh Kosman, who's a friend of mine, he's a business writer for the New York Post, great guy. He wrote a book called Buyouts of America. Josh calculated that Apollo Global Management and Texas Pacific Group made like $360 million in fees, even when they only put $70 million down on their own money. So
not a bad investment. That's a nice return.
Yeah.
You know, so all the CERB pensions which were in place, they all got wiped out. A lot of people lost jobs, the whole things like that. And a similar thing is Stations Casino is another similar type of a deal. So they go bankrupt, okay? And you know who also made a fortune on this stuff?
Their employees?
The lawyers.
Yeah,
I think the legal fees are something like $350 million or something like that. All right. So it gets worse. It gets worse. We ain't done over it. So
how could it possibly get worse?
You know, what?
How could it possibly get worse?
Well, it does. Okay, and this is all happening as we speak. Okay, I couldn't believe this. So I've been following this because I'm like, you know, like this is really financial sorcery, if you will, like something out of a Harry Potter model movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Carl Icahn's a big investor in the distressed assets. So he pushes the sale of the bankrupt company. Now when they bought this company in 2008, it was valued at $30 billion. Now last summer, the company was invested about $8 or $9 billion. Okay, so they've lost $20-30 billion along the way. Okay, all this debt. All right, and then due to pressure from Carl Icahn, they sell the company to El Dorado Resorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking this up. I said, who the heck is El Dorado Resorts? You guys, they're based in Reno.
Yeah, they're small. Yeah.
So the minnow is buying the whale or eating the whale. So I started looking, you know, it's like, so what? Well, I said, what do I know? Maybe they have, you know, because a lot of people's jobs, season employs like 60,000 people. So I said, well, maybe this is a good thing. So I started looking at El Dorado Resorts, and they're based on, and it's a tiny little company, but who's the major owners of El Dorado? Fidelity Investments, State Street, Vanguard, the usual suspects. And I'm saying, why do the shareholders, isn't Fidelity saying anything about them buying this? This is crazy. Now, at the time, El Dorado, which I guess was pretty profitable, had a trade about $40 a share. Since that time, I think El Dorado's gone to, and I can check that on, it's gone dropped to about $4 a share.
Mm.
And so I'm saying and I find out El Dorado was buying Caesars Entertainment, which just went bankrupt under so much debt. They were going to be buying the company with more debt, according to Bloomberg. And let me see if I have the article ready.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I was following the
So anyhow, so this is the whole thing. Is that so you have this company collapsing under this debt load. They're using other people's money, the Fidelity, which you get it from retail investors, and they're getting it. So the thing is, if we put the money in a safe, well-engineered life insurance company, you don't have to deal with all this shenanigans. This is right in your own backyard, and so we don't even know if this whole deal is going to go through now.
And you also mentioned station casinos. Can you give us a little background on that?
But before we transition to stations, one thing, Barry, I'm sure what happened to Caesar's pension plan that they had promised their employees during this whole bankruptcy?
Well, that's another thing, which they had a SERP plan. In other words, you guys know what SERPs are, those supplemental pension plans.
Yeah.
So those guys, they get screwed. Because the SERP, there's no, as you know, there's no protection in bankruptcy. So all the supplemental pensions get wiped out. But the guy, Gary Loveman, who was the CEO for Caesars, got $34 million before he and the month prior to them going bankrupt.
Wait. So let me just step back. So the employees had this promise, and I know even many of them were actually in retirement, relying on that check.
Yeah.
That collapses, but the CEO, before he leaves, gets about $30 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
And again, I get the facts. I wouldn't say that. It's like, but no one really, you don't get any really good hard hitting media anymore because mostly controlled. And
yeah.
So this is all fact, and and the whole thing was Loveman was. Now get this, guys. Loveman, the guy who ran the place, used to be a Harvard Business School professor of economics, and so he had this whole thing about rewards, and this is the whole thing which Caesar was, getting back people, the big high rollers back in and again and again and again, and that's what Loveman promoted, and they sold that to Harris, and then, so it's all history now. So it's just, but this is right in your own backyard.
This is fascinating. You're right. It does get better. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right?
And then when I saw El Dorado, I had no idea, guys. I just said, El Dorado, who the hell is El Dorado? You guys may know, but I said, who the hell is El Dorado?
I didn't know who El Dorado was.
Yeah.
Not a clue.
It's up in Reno, yeah. So it's interesting. So, would you keep doing what you're doing because you just got to, but people don't realize that like their money from Fidelity were the ones who was funding El Dorado.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Great point.
That's it's stupid. But I mean, and then when I found out they're financing the thing with more debt, I said, this is definitely stupid. But, that's Wall Street and that's America.
So tell us a little bit about station casinos and what happened with them.
Well, that was the same similar situation. Matter of fact, there was a guy, one of the unions, contacted me because Vegas is a big union town for the service workers, right? Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Except, yeah.
So one of the guys in the union, I started researching it, and I have it, and I'd be happy to share with you. The guys from the union did some awesome research, and he showed how much was pulled out of Stations Casino and share buybacks and dividends and that type of thing before they went bankrupt. But okay, but anyway, a private equity executive, Tom Barak, I remember, of Colony Capital. He's the guy who owns Michael Jackson's old Neverland, whatever estate up in California. He's good friends with Donald Trump. By the way, I'm a political atheist, guys. So
yeah.
So they, Colony and Fertitta, they didn't like being public company. So now being under scrutiny when Station Casino was a public company. So Barak teamed up with them and they did the leverage buyout of stations, and then they went bankrupt in 2008, 2009. Same type of thing. Mm-hmm. With Deutsche Bank, and that's, if there ever was a horrible bank in the world, it got to be Deutsche Bank, and they were the bankers. And And then they erased all this debt in bankruptcy, but they bought the distressed debt. This is one of the things that is really weird. I know you can do this, but if you, in a bankruptcy, generally the debt owners are the people who take over the equity of a company. Okay, you, Anthony, you would know that, right?
Yeah.
So what these guys do as these companies are going into bankruptcy, as they're approaching the gallows of bankruptcy, they buy the distressed debt with another entity. So when they put them into BK or bankruptcy, they end up being the new owners. It's really bizarre. So the company they control and put it in bankruptcy, they end up being the new owners. So that's what the Fertitta brothers did. And so they had that, and then they what they do, private equity does, they change the name to Bury the Dead, and they change the name from Stations to Red Rock Resorts. And then they flipped it, and now it's a public company again, which is owned by the mutual fund companies. And the Fertittas were small, so they had the UFC, the United Fighting, martial arts, mixed martial arts stuff, and they sold that for a fortune to Endeavor Entertainment in California, which is another house of debt, but that's another story for another. So it's always involves the debt and using other people's money and tax deductions. So when you look at this stuff, you look at a life insurance contract or a annuity contract, you realize that it's and believe me, there's plenty of problems in the insurance industry, but it's an honest contract in comparison to all this shenanigans.
All this, if I can't place it, but I know I've read some of your information on private equity. I think it's at the end of one of your books.
Yeah,
maybe it's guaranteed income, but is that a precursor to what's to come? You alluded to working on
that's what's happening now. That's what this is what's happening now, and this is what I've been working on this book. And God willing, I'll finish the book. The bankruptcies are just incredible. So, like 2008 was just a warm up. So what we're seeing, we noticed, and this is with the coronavirus. I don't know how bad it is in Vegas, but it's so what has happened? Retail is essentially shutting down.
Yeah.
Now, and the coronavirus is just it's like a kick. It's just a catalyst for this stuff. They're all dead bombs. It looks like J. Crew, which is the major retailer, that was under private equity. It looks like they're going to go into BK. Let me see it. There's so many of them. California Pizza. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. That they're going to go bankrupt. And most of these, not all of them, okay, but a large chunk of them, are the same type of methodology why Caesars Entertainment went bankrupt or Stations Casino went bankrupt. So it's always about the debt, overloading the companies with so much debt. And so this is kind of the subject of my fourth book, which I've been working on about 7-8 years since I finished the Pirates too.
Phenomenal. I don't know what else to say. This is you don't get this information anywhere else, and that's one of the reasons I love this series of books. I look forward to the fourth one that's going to be coming out soon. But yeah, this is awesome. One of the comments that you made is that some of these companies or institutions are using some pension funds to use some of these buyouts, and most of the time, what you're hearing you got something to say on that? Go for it. I haven't finished the question yet, but I'll go ahead.
Well, this is, it's always, you got to find, it's always about, simple guys, it's always about finding the greater fool. Okay. And that's, so.
Found him.
It's always about finding the greater fool. So who are the biggest source of pooled capital? It's the state public pension funds. Okay. And they're dying for yield because the Federal Reserve has bailed out all these banks. There's no yield in fixed income. So they're pushed into these private equities to meet these future obligations. Now the whole thing, and private equity loves it because they can lock up the money for 10, 15 years and collect rents and fees and all this type of thing. And so like the collapse of Caesars Entertainment, CalSTRS, which was the California State Peaches pension plan, was a major investor. CalPERS, I think New York State and New Jersey, state of New Jersey. So they're getting really the money from the from these pension plans because they have to meet the obligations. The same thing in Vegas. I mean, I have some clients in Vegas who were covered under government pension plans, but so they have to get a yield. So because the interest rate's been so low, they've been forced into things which get a higher rate of return. Now they have done well in the past, but like everything else in Wall Street, they overdo it, and it just doesn't work anymore.
In regards to pensions and some of the expectations on rates of returns and those things, you touch on that as far as the expected rate of return versus the actual rate of return in that book.
Yeah. So and then there's two actuarial firms. Good friend of mine, Steve Church, who goes to Google and Piscataqua Research out in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Very, very bright guy, good friend. He researched the pension plans between 2000 and 2017. About 70% of the pension plans, or $4 trillion, what they projected and what they got. So most of the pension plans, this is kind of a composite, guys. They need to get about 7.5% rate of return to maintain current benefits and fund future benefits. Now, the whole irony of the whole thing is that, so what he found is that although they projected roughly 7.5%, 7.25% rate of return, they actually only get about 5.69%. So there's a 30% error basis on this. Now, believe it or not, prior to 2000, they didn't even keep the records for the pension plans. Mm-hmm. Okay, so so a lot of these states, they really, even automation, they really didn't have the rates. But anyway, so that's what he came out with. Now, that wasn't an outlier because another guy, Cliffwater Associates, they're an actuarial firm out of Marina Del Rey, California, and in New York. They did a similar study measuring pensions between 2000 and 2017, and they found out that the actual rate of return was roughly around 5.69%. So there's a huge margin of error just to begin with. So these guys are underwater, even if they got the money to begin with. Now, the irony of the whole thing is that in 2000, if you bought a treasury bill, the rate of return for a 30-year treasury bill is 5.66% thereabouts. So if you just bought treasury bills back in year 2000, you would have had risk-free return over the past 17 years and not be subject to all the Wall Street shenanigans. So what you find out is that, mathematically, Anthony, is everything pretty much returns to the mean, and people do not make all that money in the market, although they want their period to be. They really don't.
That's one of the things that I wish more people understood, is that one of the many lessons I got from your books is that people don't make money in the market. Usually they'll put money after they've made their wealth. Right? I think I might have butchered that.
Yeah.
Usually somebody creates business either through a skill set, a business, something like that. And then afterwards, what they'll do is they'll put it in the market. It's not people go to the market to create wealth. And that's what your books highlight.
Yeah, and that's the thing which I find. I've never met a man who's made millions in mutual funds. I never have. I knew entrepreneur. Now the mutual fund companies made, the Johnson family out of Fidelity. I mean, they're one of the wealthiest families in the world. They made millions. As a matter of fact, Fidelity had record revenues in 2019, over 20 billion, 20.9 billion, and record profits like 7.2 billion. So I think the average mutual fund investor probably been walloped by 24% this year, and but they made money. So and this is why all the banks and everyone want to get into the fund business, because they can collect these annuity-like income streams from the funds.
Now you mentioned mutual funds, and you said you've never met a man that made his million in mutual funds. And I think, did I see an endorsement or a recommendation on your website from Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, on there?
That's true. Yeah,
I saw that. I saw that, and I was like, that looks completely out of place to me.
Well, this is the irony of the whole thing, and someone referred me to. So I sent my books to Jack Bogle, and because he's very, he's telling about the retirement crisis. I said, I like this guy, kind of what he's saying. So I started research. So I said, what the heck? I'll send my books to him and see if he reads them, whatever. So I go on the web and I send him the books, and he loved them.
That's crazy.
He loved my books. Because he's saying, but how much these, Wall Street extracts some fees.
Yeah.
So he's saying everyone should go into index funds. All right. So, and then when I published my last book, Guaranteed Income, he actually endorsed the book. he said, I was full of passion and on the right track, and he thought it was really good about using annuities for retirement income. So, but the whole thing was Jack Bogle and all these guys recommend, and this is one of the things which I discovered is that they recommend low cost for everybody for regular investors, but but Jack Bogle, he there wasn't low pay for Jack. I found out from a friend of mine, Neil Weinberg at Bloomberg. He's a great guy. If you Google Neil Weinberg, he's one of the better reporters, I think, in the United States, from Bloomberg. But he was doing a piece on Wellington management. And make a long story short, he discovered, and it was cut through a divorce. So if we ever get divorced, we got to be careful because Vanguard was a private company. It was a mutual company, so they didn't have to disclose a lot of the stuff. But it came out that Jack Bogle was making $8-9 million back in '97, telling everyone to buy index funds. So while it was low cost for, Jack was kind of trumpeting low cost for investors, he was making his fortune himself. So and he was actually, prior to running Vanguard, he was running Wellington Management, which is one of the largest wealth managers in the world, based out of Boston. So it's just so a lot of the stuff is really. And then when he died, they say he died with he only died with 80 or 90 million. So, but that's so. So this is one of the whole things which index funds, which are so many people. You probably see it with your clients. Isn't mostly everyone in index funds or
mostly? Yeah.
But they don't guarantee.
Not if I have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, they're not our clients, but because we're more building wealth outside of Wall Street. But when somebody comes,
you got to look at. You got to do a fiduciary. You got to be. You got to look at what they have and so forth.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is the Vanguard the index funds guarantee nothing. And this has been one of the the greater scams, which and I agree in principle, but there's no stewardship. There's no cops on the beat. And so BlackRock, Vanguard, Infidelity, State Street, they have these huge portfolios of index, and they collect a little bit of fee, but when you're getting trillions of dollars, they're still making a ton of money.
And they guarantee nothing, and there's no responsibility or really responsibility in the stewardship of it, right? Is that, man, what you find is they can lose it, and there's no repercussions that somebody could come after.
Well, the greatest example I always give is General Electric, which was once the largest industrial company in the world, and essentially the giant. They had about market cap of about almost $600 billion in 2000. Now today, I don't know if I look at my iPhone, GE maybe probably 60 billion. So they've lost 90% of its value. Now, the irony of the whole thing is Vanguard is their largest shareholder. Okay, of GE, and owns like 14% of the stock. I could be wrong, but it changes from day to day, whatever. But Vanguard was the largest shareholder of the stock, and so you would think that Vanguard owning 14% of GE would have some say over his executive pay. Well, it was like the Fox Garden at Hen House. The guy by the name of John Brennan, who was the former CEO of Vanguard, was the head of the compensation committee at General Electric. So the most important guy who oversaw this excessive compensation was the guy who ran Vanguard. And Vanguard is the largest shareholder of GE. Jeez. Now, he said nothing when GE was melting down, when Jeffrey Immelt spent $24 billion to buy back shares at $30 a share, and now it's like trading at $6 a share. They said nothing. So my whole point is that this, you could just stop right there and just examine it, and it's all public information. By the way, I wouldn't say any of this stuff if it wasn't public. So there's actually no. So Jeffrey Immelt walked out the door. Two jets. Jeffrey Immelt. He was the guy who had the two jets. He had one flying there, one following him. I call him two jets. Jeffrey. He walked out the door with 130 million in 2017, and 84 million was an annuity.
Wow.
So so this is again, and GE was just a large bank.
That's frustrating because I often, I'm a capitalist as well, so I don't want to put limits on people's pay.
No, neither do I.
Right. But what should be some checks and balances should be that board of directors making sure that that CEO and the executive team is paid fairly. But it's hard to really determine what's fair. But when I see these companies making a lot of money and now even cutting employees, particularly right now, and then these executives are getting multi-millions, and then when they leave, they give them an even bigger package. And I would expect that the board of directors there would be kind of keeping things in check, but it doesn't sound like they are. Am I just off, Barry?
No,
Yeah.
they rubber stamp it, and it's very sad. So guys like Brennan, a guy named John Brennan, again, I wouldn't say any of this stuff unless I researched it. He's getting paid $400,000 a year, essentially to rubber stamp it. And, and then his successor, Flannery, he got kicked out. He was only on board for like 14 months as CEO. He walked out the door with $23 million. But I mean, this is wealth beyond most people's even comprehension. And they're getting paid for failure. And again, and it's the biggest chumps in the room with the mutual fund companies, and no one's talking about it.
Awesome.
So.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the concerns with mutual funds and some stocks. So where are some of the safe places you think you like to save money, Barry?
Well, obviously life insurance is one of the safest things, and this, limited to amount of companies you can use now, and what you want is generally mutual companies. Mm-hmm. And I would also say stay away from the private equity owned companies, which would be Apollo Global Management. That's another story, but obviously annuities for lifetime income, because because, and this is, I think, Anthony, you as an accountant, the purpose of a retirement plan, Anthony, isn't it to provide retirement income? It's not to gamble with Wall Street, but this is what the whole thing's turned into. Is it's a big freaking gamble.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, so a pension plan is an annuity. So using annuities, but anyway, so it's a one safe place. Obviously, I like. We do, we like hard assets. We like anything that generates cash flow, rental income, small business interests, hard assets, gold, silver. Unfortunately, because we probably will have hyperinflation at some point. Anything that generates cash flow, I'm always, but also I also tell people to have really the best investments in themselves, their faith, their family, their friends, their physical fitness, and then finances. So I'm kind of like God's first and everything else is second, but that's, so faith, family, friends, because no one can do this on their own. I couldn't have done this without guys like Nelson Nash or even guys like you, or the people who have great people. I'm really blessed with really good people who believe in me. Mm-hmm. And so then, physical fitness, you got to be in shape, and then finances. So those are really the most important things in my life. I mean, money's not my God. I like money. Don't get me wrong. It's not my God. Like these guys. I mean, how much you need? I mean, it's just
right. Yeah. So Barry, what is it that you like about life insurance?
Well, it's Bob Castellone said it's an economic workhorse because it's a saving system. It's it's systematic. You can put ongoing monthly deposit into it. It's got tax benefits. The benefit goes to the beneficiaries, income tax free. And you have to remember, guys, I've been doing this so long. I've had 61 death claims. Over my career. So I know the benefit of it. So it's unencumbered cash. It's also professionally managed, because you want to have a professional management of the product. It's also it's a great tool to become your own bank, finance automobiles, things like that. You can't beat it. It's probably one of the best ideas that there is in financial planning today. So that's a lot of things. You can do so much with it. And, and it's got guarantees. It's got a guaranteed increase. And this is why the banks buy it, guys.
Yeah.
Because when JP Morgan has 11 billion in cash surrender value, and I know they do, okay, when that goes up with a guarantee by 4% each year, it passes right through to their income statement. So it may not look like a big deal to you guys or to me, but actually the increase in capital improves their income statement for Wall Street. So it's one of the things you only can look at it. You don't have to worry about it going up or down. I mean, look, it was the average people down by 18% or something like that. You need to get them at 36% just to get back even. You have to worry about the life insurance. I'm not saying life insurance is a panacea. It's not. I mean, you got to really work hard and all that stuff. But when you look at it, it does so many things. And then plus you're not in Arizona, but Arizona, I don't know what the creditor protection is.
100%.
In Nevada?
Yeah.
Yep.
Freaking awesome.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Every state has some level of asset protection of your cash value. Many, like Nevada, 100% of it is protected.
Nevada's great. Arizona's great. Florida's great. New York's great. Texas is awesome. Well, do you know the Ken Lay project? You know the Ken Lay story
From
remember Enron?
Yeah, I remember Enron. Tell us the story. I'd love to hear.
This is the Ken Lay story. So this is what you need. So in Enron, I think around 2000 was the 7th largest company in the United States. It's a pipeline company, and it ended up being a financial fiasco, as we know, and they went bankrupt. And Skillings and all those guys went to jail, and it was just. But anyhow, this was the company. It was the 7th largest company in America at the time. So this is true, and I couldn't believe this when I heard this on public radio. And I said, I got to research this. But anyway, I heard this. So Ken Lay was the executive of Enron. Now, I actually went through the SEC reports where Enron had bought all this. They owned corporate-owned life insurance, and they owned all the executive insurance on the founders and stuff like that. So when Ken Lay died in 2003 or 2004 thereabouts, when he died, he had like 13 million assets left over, but he had $13 million in liabilities. So at death, the liabilities canceled out the assets, but he kept his $10.5 million of split draw life insurance from Enron, and he had another like 3.5 to 5 million in annuities. And he was resident of the state of Texas. Now he died in Colorado, but he was resident of Texas. So under the state laws, like in Nevada, whatever, but in Texas, the life insurance proceeds and the annuity proceeds were exempt from the claims of creditors. So all you need is a Ken Lay print. So when everything was wiped out, Linda Lay actually got 13 million or so in unencumbered cash from for the spouses listening out there. So if you're in Nevada or Arizona, Florida, or New York, now New Hampshire is horrible. I mean, if you go back or whatever, they don't give you a box of tools, but but so asset protection is another big thing.
Barry, what do you like about annuities?
The guarantee. I mean, they're idiot proof. I mean, they work.
When you said idiot proof, we both pointed at each other. So
they work.
Even Anthony can't screw that up.
They work.
And again, the whole thing is that, again, it's do as I say, not as I do. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, this year, and you can write this down, Cameron, okay, bought an annuity for like $500 million to essentially fund their pension assets, pension obligations for their employees in the UK. Lehman Brothers bought one for $1 billion and to fund their pension obligations in the UK, but Lehman Brothers also dumped their pension obligation out of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, by the way. General Motors uses annuities, TRW, Rolls-Royce, BMW, Bristol Myers Squibb, all these CBS News bought one. New York Times bought one. But you see that on the news?
No.
I heard about New York Times. And I had to dig for it. I had to go in the proxy statement because they have to, because there's publicly traded. So I had to go to the proxy statement. It was buried. So annuity, like people like the Times always kind of bashes annuities, but I said, and they bought one for $250 million. CBS News bought one for $800 million. Now it's going to be difficult as we go forward because we can't get bond yields, but this is all true. So that's the irony of the whole thing. So, and I know a lot of financiers like the life insurance too. So I know that I don't really do business with financiers too much, but I know they are big believers in it.
I'll share a quick little story with one of my clients' mother was 72 years old. And one of her biggest concerns was running out of money.
Yeah.
I mean, but she had her funds at one of the typical financial planners. And I started looking at it. She didn't want to be invested in the market and she wanted income to last her life, but that's not the products that she was in. She actually lost about 25% in March when everything tanked. And even before that, looking at what she was on track for how much she was taking out, she was going to run out of money in 5 years.
Yeah, it's and you're that age too. I mean, guys, I'm a little bit ahead of you guys. Okay, and that I've seen some of my clients I've had for 20, 30 years. Now they're in the mid 70s, late 70s. And some people are really, really sharp, really, really bright, and they're starting to lose it. So why do you want to be dealing with this casino crap?
Yeah.
No, and people want what I found when people are working, they feel they're immortal, right? That I'm always going to make more money, or it's always going to go up. But when you're in retirement, the rules change.
Yeah.
And even with this situation, just by moving the money from mutual funds into an annuity that wasn't tied to the market, that provided her guaranteed income no matter how long she lived, like that's what really made her happy, is just having that certainty that she's going to get that check in there no matter how long she lives. And one thing that was very interesting about this, all of the money was in an IRA. So all the money she's taking out is taxable. And also, to make it even worse, she was collecting Social Security. And because of the amount of distribution she was taking, that Social Security became taxable. So she was paying, put her in the 22% tax bracket. And by moving some assets around and changing her distribution a little bit, she's going to save $5,000 a year in taxes. And so she saved money in taxes and she has less risk. And
what's wrong with that?
And what was interesting, when she went to her old advisor and says, "Hey, I'm moving everything to an annuity," want to know what he said? "Why didn't you tell me you wanted an annuity?"
Yeah.
That's his job. Right. Yeah. And I think the moral of the story is that there are some financial products that can deliver what you're looking for. They may not sound sexy, but really in retirement, what you want is certainty. Certainty is the sexy in retirement. You can quote that if you want, Cameron.
CPA telling everybody what's sexy.
Yeah. No, Barry, I'm sorry. I'm kind of starting to take over. Sorry. Not sorry. But Barry, I know we're about to wrap this up, but as you know, Nelson Nash was a mentor to us and has literally changed our lives. I mean, I would be doing tax returns right now if it was not for him. What would you say to somebody who's on the fence about incorporating the infinite banking concept as part of one of their strategies?
There's not a lot of these strategies that work, and it's one of the To the best of my knowledge, it's one of the only things that work. And do the research and look at the facts. I think, this is in the Bible. My people perish due to lack of knowledge. And who is it? I forget. And there's so much of what you see right now. There's so much contempt prior to investigation. I just want to makes me sick. And I think I quote that in the contempt prior to investigation. And this is what people don't, because, what it is, guys, the asset managers driving the show. The mutual fund companies, the banks, whatever, they're really driving the show. They have they have most of the 401k assets. They have most of the savings assets and so forth. So they're driving the show. They're driving the narrative. And the thing is that, and I've actually had one of the great things about writing books and stuff is that I've actually got to know some really great business writers out there who have helped me. And, I couldn't have done it without their research. Okay. But their hands are kind of tied. So they agree with me on a lot of the stuff, but they really can't tell the truth because they have families to feed and everyone else.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, I guess, maybe for the infinite banking concept is really, I don't know. Do any of you guys play sports? Cameron, do you play sports or?
Do you, Cameron?
Absolutely, every day.
Yeah, okay. So what do you play for sports?
He plays ping pong. I wouldn't say ping pong is a sport, but
right now I played soccer, but I've played sports my entire life.
Yeah, so I used to play hockey and stuff like that. And so the whole thing is that if you're playing soccer, you don't start out the game really good, do you? I mean, it takes a long period of time to work things over and over. And if you practice and you're diligent, you eat right and you practice right, if you do these things consistently over time, you have good coaching, whatever, you're eventually going to get better. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we know that, like I write book tips on how you write a book. I have one line at a time. It's horrible to do them, okay? But if I eventually do it one day, day at a time, keep doing it, eventually I get a book. It's a lot of discipline. So we know that this is how we create a great business, if we become a great athlete, or so if your artistry, whatever, it comes from time and discipline, a lot of rejection, a lot of failure, okay? And that's kind of the way it works in financing too. And so this whole idea you can get something for nothing is BS. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in our personal lives. It doesn't work when you have a great company or a great country, okay? You can't get something for nothing. And this is what's been sold to the American public today. You can get something for nothing with mutual funds, and you can't.
Totally agree. And one last question, Anthony might have one more, but it more or less just a personal curiosity is the way that I see we're talking about life insurance, whole life versus universal life.
Yeah.
And one of the themes that we've talked about today is that transfer of risk.
Yeah.
The way that I see the difference between those two products, and tell me if you agree or not, is that whole life insurance is placing risk on the insurance company. They're maintaining that risk.
That's all. I want to have some big fat insurance company to have the risk on, because these IUL products, okay, and there is a place for these IULs, and if you're uber wealthy, these variable universal lives, if you're a Rockefeller, which by the way those guys do buy it, then it just becomes a tax charge. But for most people, their best bets are going to be with whole life products, because the risk has been transferred onto the insurance company. And I've had these. I sold the universal lives, whatever, in the past, and I had a quick story on this. At Universal Life, I had a widow, she was 20, 30 years ago. It was a pretty big policy which I sold, and it worked out well in the end. But we had done this. It was a major policy for estate tax at the time, and we needed the money, and we used Universal Life, and I really didn't know that much about the time. I said, boy, this is a lot cheaper than whole life, when it was. But I got kind of scared, because 3-4 years into the policy, all of a sudden the mortality, all of a sudden the cash values get eaten up by the universal increasing mortality charges. Okay, I was like, oh, holy moly! I'm like, what's going to happen? I knew in 2-3 years, they was going to run out of gas, and so. Unfortunately, or whatever, fortunately for me, unfortunately the woman died, and so the company ended up paying the claim. But one of the things which are now, it's like, I'll never go there again and put the death benefit at risk. And So, that's, so a lot of these products, and actually index UL, whatever, can be a good product to create retirement income streams, but it's not a long-term death benefit. I mean, it's just, I have some of these arguments with some people who are very big in this space. So you can use IUL as a retirement vehicle, and then you can annuitize it through a 1035 exchange. But as a term of permanent death benefit, is lousy generally.
Okay, Barry. One last question is there? Do you feel there's any correlation between the rising stock market and the people contributing to their 401ks? Like, there wasn't a 401k 40 years ago. Hardly anybody was in the market, or more as investors were in the market, right? But now everybody's in the market. Is there some, if you look, the stock market has increased over the last 40 years. Do you feel some of that is in part because there's new money coming in every 2 weeks?
Oh yeah, well, that's the savings is gone away from the safe vehicle. It's called economics called disintermediation. So the reason why people are pushing to because they're saving less and less, and the finances in general, Americans really gone downhill on the average American, regrettably. And so what has happened is so people are desperate to get more yield, so they're forced into the stock market to get higher yield, because you can't get a safe return. You can't get a 5-6% safe return in a bank account. That just ain't out there. So you're forced into a highly speculative instrument, whether it be a stock, a bond, or an ETF or something like this. So the reason why it's actually been a gradual, and if you read my book, since 1980, really, and if you want to really, there's been really a gradual destruction of everything that FDR put in place, and then we had things like the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which should probably re-implemented, because you should not have depository institutions and investment banks under one roof. But this is what has happened now. So I don't know but the reason is because the more and more of the control of the money has gone to the speculative piece of the market. So some of these assets this is what the Fed's doing right now. This is why they're pushing up the price of asset prices. So, but the thing when it comes down is that the retail investor has no protection for that.
That's the bottom line, right? That's kind of
no, there isn't any.
Barry, thanks so much. I'm looking at my notes here as we get to the end, and I think I got through maybe a quarter of my questions that I've had for you. So we got to have you back.
Okay.
We'd love to have you back.
Good to see you guys. Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you today. I learned a ton, which is not always the case when I hang out with Anthony. So I enjoy these types of conversations.
He's a recovering CPA.
Thanks again, Barry. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Barry.